Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this 15th edition of the Project 2049 Institute Strategic Competition webinar. My name is John Gastrite, and I am president of the Project 2049 Institute. And today, we are thrilled to have as our special guest, Mr. Nick Snyder, Director of the Office of Japanese Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. On April 10th, President Biden hosted Japanese Prime Minister Kishida for his official state visit to Washington. The exchange was packed with new initiatives and joint plans, including the joint lunar space mission, mutual investment, and R&D collaboration in semiconductors, AI, quantum technology, and the future of energy. They discussed cooperative efforts to address cross-Taiwan Strait issues, instability on the Korean peninsula, Russia's continued aggression toward Ukraine, and the worsening situation in the Middle East. The man in the middle, responsible for pulling all of that together at the Department of State, was none other than today's guest. As you can imagine, I'm excited to get this conversation started. Before that, however, I've got a couple of administrative announcements to make sure you have the best opportunity to participate. And here they are. There are two ways to participate in today's live Q&A session. You may send questions directly to ask@project2049.net. That's ask@project2049.net. If you RSVP'd for the event, we sent an event reminder to that email just minutes ago. You can respond directly to that email with your question if you'd wish. If you have a YouTube account and are watching this stream on Project 2049's YouTube channel, you may submit questions in the YouTube chat box and our team will collect them and send them to our moderator, Jennifer Hong. Please include your name and affiliation when submitting questions. Questions with names and affiliations will be prioritized. With that, it's time to get started. And to kick things off, I have the pleasure of introducing our boss, the chairman of the Project 2049 Institute, the Honorable Randy Schreiber. Randy?
John, thank you. Appreciate you kicking us off. And I too am really excited to have Nick Snyder join us. John, as John mentioned, he was in the thick of things, in the middle of things, really for orchestrating the Prime Minister's visit to Washington. But beyond that, he has a very long and distinguished career, which I will give brief coverage to, probably not adequate given all these amazing postings and accomplishments. But briefly, in addition to his current service as Director of Japan Affairs, Nick is a member of the U.S. Senior Foreign Service. Previously, he served as the Deputy Coordinator for the new China House. He also helped stand up a new office within the Department of State, a new bureau, the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. I sort of see a trend. Whenever there's a new initiative, new office, they send Nick in to help get things up and running smoothly, given his tremendous management skills. He has service overseas as well, including some very interesting posts. The acting deputy chief of mission in New Zealand. He served in Beijing. He served in Casablanca as the deputy consul general. And given that Nick rhymes with Rick, I have all kinds of lines about Casablanca and your service there, but I'll forego those. He worked for the vice president in the previous administration, which is when I first had the opportunity to work with him very closely on the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific issues, a key guy as we were really reorienting the entire government effort to be better postured for strategic competition with China, and Nick was a key contributor to that. In his civilian life, he's been in the financial community, working M&A issues. He's been a journalist, so really a rich background. And he attended a modest school called Harvard University, where he got his BA. So, Nick, thanks again for taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule to join us. And if I could just start with a very general, open question about the visit. You know, we're a few weeks out now. But sometimes, time and distance helps a little bit to evaluate the real impact of a visit, sort of the trajectory of implementation after the wheels go up and people begin to think about the meaning of the joint statement. So with a lot of latitude here, could you just give us your assessment of how Prime Minister Kishida's visit went and what some of the major accomplishments were? I think you're still on mute, Nick.
Thanks, Randy. Sorry about that. Take two. Really delighted to be here and come to you live from my office at the State Department. Want to thank Project 2049 for putting this all together and giving me the chance to talk to all of you. It was a tremendously successful visit on all accounts, and the Japanese would share that view, as would the Philippines in the trilateral that followed the official visit with the state dinner. Thanks for teeing me up. I'll just talk for a little bit about sort of the big picture, and then we can dive into more questions, and looking forward to hearing from the panelists and from all the questions out there live. So delighted to be here at a time when the U.S. Japan alliance has never been stronger. What was for decades a security-centric partnership has turned into a whole of society alliance. And this visit really was about underscoring that and showcasing it to the world. And the theme was a global partnership for the future. And I think the 70+ deliverables that came with the visit and all we discussed, all the president and the prime minister discussed and really agreed upon, showcase that as well. We have robust economic investments and business ties, as well as very strong people-to-people ties that were evident in the visit. And in every sector, every field, every issue, Japan and the United States are standing shoulder to shoulder in a way that is not only unique in our bilateral relationship, but also stands as a model for what it means to be allies. The strength of our alliance isn't a matter of fact, though. It's a result of a lot of hard work by many people on both sides of the Pacific, and Randy Shriver has a role in that too. So I definitely want to recognize that. Since the outset of the Biden-Harris administration, they have focused, and we have here at the State Department have focused on reinvesting and reinvigorating our alliances. Nowhere has President Biden's strategy paid off more than in the Indo-Pacific, and especially with Japan. Our alliances and partnerships are integral to securing a free, open, prosperous, and resilient global order, and Japan has been in lockstep alongside the United States as we look to achieve our shared vision for the region and the world. We are strategically aligned and cooperating in every area across every part of the world. The state visit of Prime Minister Kishida was a celebration of that bilateral relationship as it evolves into that global partnership and becomes a real force for peace and prosperity across the world. Since President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida took office, Prime Minister Kishida and President in 2021, the two leaders have met nearly a dozen times over the past 3 years. And the official visit this month underscored the high ambition within our alliance across defense and security cooperation, as well as deepening our partnerships on space, technology, economic investment, fighting climate change, and strengthening our people-to-people ties. I think and I'll just kind of talk through some of those buckets. On defense and security, we are modernizing the U.S. Japan alliance, enabling greater cooperation and integration of our forces to ensure they're optimally postured, and look to other like-minded partners on command and control, on co-production and co-sustainability, on the future of AUKUS Pillar 2. All these things were part of the immense package of deliverables. But the theme, both of this bilateral visit and the trilateral, was not just on the security and defense, but on the economic cooperation, the prosperity part of the peace and prosperity. So on space, we're going to unprecedented heights, pun unintended, including to the moon, where we signed an agreement for Japan to build the first fully pressurized lunar rover, and announced our shared goal for Japan to be the first non-American astronaut, for a Japanese citizen to be the first non-American astronaut to land on the moon on a future Artemis mission. On the tech side, and you know, so much of the conversation these days revolves around emerging and critical technology. We signed a $110 million joint artificial intelligence partnership with the University of Washington, and Tsukuba University, as well as Carnegie Mellon and Keio University, with private sector funding from Microsoft, ARM, NVIDIA, and Amazon. We also discussed efforts to tackle climate change and promote the transition to clean energy, including Japan being the first international partner in the Department of Energy's offshore wind shot program. And we also agreed on a ministerial dialogue to maximize synergies and impacts from the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which is, about $369 billion, and Japan's Green Transformation Promotion Strategy, the GX Fund, which is about $150 billion. And also we talked about how we would diversify our supply chains and protect them. We also launched a diplomacy dialogues that to better coordinate both our diplomacy and development efforts globally with Japan, and had a major announcement on undersea cables. A huge investment, both from the private sector, Google, and from our two governments, which will bring connectivity for the first time, real stable, open, secure connectivity to Tuvalu, with branching lines to FSM and Kiribati, among others. On the people-to-people side, we announced a new Mineta Ambassadors program, $12 million and counting, that will help bring high school, graduate, college students from Japan to the United States and defray those costs that are rising with the falling yen that make it prohibitive for Japanese students to come to America. And we need to continue to build the ties that undergird this alliance, and this is going to be a great way to do that. So those are some of the key do-outs. I mean, we are maximally aligning on just about everything. And while it's a challenging geopolitical moment, we're prioritizing our work in the Indo-Pacific and making sure that we're highlighting and signaling the importance of our alliances and partnerships. And that's one reason, in addition to the Prime Minister Kishida's visits, President Biden not only had a bilateral meeting with Philippines President Marcos, he hosted the first ever leader summit between the United States, Japan, and the Philippines. Also, I think a tremendous success with a focus on economic development, including in the Luzon corridor, but also workforce development, about $8 million in open radio access network promotion and funding, and definitely a maritime security and Coast Guard component, but a more holistic discussion about how allies and partners work together on economic development as well. So that's a lot. Really looking forward to the questions, but it was a tremendous visit. There was a palpable good mood, great joint congressional address by Prime Minister Kishida, and some of the two takeaway quotes were the number of times Japan and the U.S. standing shoulder to shoulder together was mentioned, was only dwarfed by the number of times that Prime Minister Kishida said what happens in Ukraine, really is reflected or could be what happens in East Asia. His direct tie between Ukraine and East Asia really came through as well. And I think that gives a true sense of that global partnership. Thanks. Back to you, Randy.
Great, Nick. That's really a comprehensive review of what was just an absolutely stunning number of deliverables. I think you mentioned 70, and appreciate you walking us through those various baskets and what should be highlighted. Having been in positions like yours and working on these visits, there's oftentimes a long lead time, and you work with the counterpart, very intensely to hammer these things out. And of course, the end product is this nice shiny joint statement, but some of these surely took some considerable work and effort on both parts. Is there any part of this joint statement that you're particularly proud of, either because, it took both sides really to put any kind of hesitation aside and work with one another, or because of the significance of the initiative itself and the magnitude of the impact that you expect. Anything that you want to particularly say, this is a really meaningful outcome for us?
Thanks, Randy. I would say, first of all, we've all been through a lot of these joint negotiating sessions. Comparatively, this was incredibly smooth. I would say violent agreement on a lot of the topics, which made it a lot easier to, get really into just a couple of things that we wanted to make sure that we were very precise on the language of. And I think that agreement and that sense that we are in this together, not only for the region, but for the world, was one of the facets that shone through to me right from the beginning. Very proud, I would say, of getting that announcement of the Japanese astronaut being the first non-American on the moon. I think that was a great and very interagency achievement, as well as I think the undersea cable project shows the way that you can have the private sector involved and really do things that are strategic and answer the call. The Pacific really cares about this. We are showing up and we are showing them how we can help them tangibly day to day through this. So those are two things I'd highlight. I mean, the suite of defense deliverables are also pretty incredible and very ambitious. And to have them in the place that they are, some of them still, on their way, the rhetoric there, but the details to be sorted is also pretty impressive, given how far we've come with Japan on some of these things over the last decade. And then last thing, the critical technologies piece and some of the work we're doing on renewables and in the civil nuclear field, I think is really great. And I'll leave it at that for now.
I appreciate that. As somebody who's worked on these things and read many, it just really was astounding, the number, but also the granularity. For leaders to get into such detail on an issue like command and control is quite impressive. But in certain parts of the joint statement, there was direct guidance given to follow-on dialogues, particularly the 2+2, and we're eager to see that come to fruition. We have a Secretary of State here, boss, who's had a few things on his plate, traveling the world and probably juggling so many things. When might we expect a 2+2 roughly? You're probably not in a position to make news for us today, but roughly, and are you confident that they'll be able to pick up this mantle of achievement and really start to make it a meaningful agenda when it comes to implementation?
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, I'm very confident that our security 2+2 will happen. It'll happen for sure within the next 6 months. I think much sooner than that, but we'll leave that to the schedulers to sort out. That's beyond my control, as you know. But it will definitely be happening, and some of the kind of most ambitious parts of the defense deliverables will be handled through that security 2+2 channel, which should happen in Tokyo this year, because it goes back and forth. There's also an economic 2+2, which we'll see when that happens, but that's another good venue for working through some of these great deliverables. So I'll leave it at that without giving too much away.
Sure. No, I understand. It's hard to talk specifically about schedules of cabinet level people, minister level people, but we are eager to see that come together because we think it's important for the follow through and the implementation phase of all this, as I'm sure you are. You mentioned the trilateral with President Marcos, which was, I think you said, unprecedented at the leaders level. I certainly don't recall such a meeting in the past. Could you talk a little bit more about the significance of that and maybe address where those areas of commonality are between the three countries in terms of perceptions of the region, in terms of creating an agenda for trilateral work?
Absolutely. This has, first of all, it was unprecedented. This was the first ever trilateral summit leaders level meeting. So there was a lot to talk about. It was, important time for them to get together, given all the PRC dangerous and, illegal activity in around, especially around Second Thomas Shoal. They had a lot to talk about. They released a joint vision statement, which recommend to everyone for some great reading. But to kind of simplify it into some of the buckets of things they talked about and agreed on. Again, there of course is a maritime component where they expressed serious concerns about the PRC's dangerous and aggressive behavior in the East and South China Seas, including the PRC's repeated obstruction of Philippine vessels and disruption of supply lines to the Second Thomas Shoal. And the U.S. and Japan agreed to continue to support Philippine Coast Guard capacity building and improve interoperability and advance maritime security and safety. We'll also conduct a trilateral maritime training activity around Japan in 2025 and humanitarian assistance and disaster response exercise within the next year or so. But there was promoting economic growth, highlighting more than $1 billion in U.S. company investments. And Japan highlighted $4 billion in private sector investment. They announced the Luzon Economic Corridor, supporting connectivity between Subic Bay, Clark, Manila, and Batangas. And this is investments in high impact infrastructure, including rails, port modernization, clean energy, and semiconductor supply chains, as well as agribusiness. And they talked about committing at least $8 million for open radio access network field trials in the Asian Open RAN Academy in Manila. They talked about also workforce development. And so you could see that these were pretty, again, just like with those 70 plus deliverables of the bilateral visit, people got in there and really started to talk about the details of what does, this alliance and partnership building really look like, and how do we work together to bolster each other and to help our allies and partners.
That's great. Thank you for that detailed explanation. It is really important work. You've also got a lot of experience on the China side, both in country and recent service at the China House. Xi Jinping has been busy recently in Europe with his travels, but surely they paid close attention to the visit of Prime Minister Kishida, the trilateral that you just spoke about. How do you think China's taken all this in, and what is the hoped for reaction, and what do you suppose the more nuanced reactions might be?
Sure. You can read the words of the foreign ministry spokesperson, and we received sort of similar on the government to government side, and I think those speak for themselves. This should not be something China should worry about if they are acting in accordance with, legally and seeking for a world where there is peace and stability. I'll leave it at that, but we are doing what we should be doing to make sure there's a free and open, not just Indo-Pacific, but world. And China will react if they want to, and we welcome conversation with them. The president's been very clear about his strategy of invest, align, compete. We are competing vigorously, but we won't seek to manage it so it doesn't go into conflict.
Thank you. That's clearly one to continue to keep an eye on. I'll make a comment about domestic politics. I know you're at the State Department and you don't do our domestic politics, and of course, probably shouldn't say a lot about an ally's domestic politics. But it occurs to me that there's a bit of uncertainty. Prime Minister Kishida didn't get the bump that many of us had hoped for out of this visit, and in fact, shortly followed by a by-election that didn't go well for the LDP. So a little bit of uncertainty going forward on the Japan side. And on our side, of course, we have an election coming up, which, if you just read the statements of the current president seeking a second term and the former president seeking a second term, there might be some different views on alliance issues. And so it strikes me that there's a bit of uncertainty on both sides. Does that, and here's where I think this question is more in your lane. Does that create a sense of urgency to get some things locked in now, or is this potentially a period of kind of muddling through and there may be an obstacle thrown up here or there if there's a cabinet reshuffle or snap election or any of these things? What's your mindset approaching this?
Well, a couple of things. One, this did not feel like people were panicked or anything like that. In fact, I've rarely seen Prime Minister Kishida so relaxed, at ease, laughing, cracking jokes, and yet completely engaged, really having these great in-depth conversations, delivering great remarks both in public and private, and fully committed to the alliance, as was President Biden. Really moving, welcoming ceremony, toasts. So I think that one, it felt to me that this is enduring. This is a shift and a new role for Japan in the world, and a new, like I was saying, a new chapter, a new era in the alliance, where we move from the hub and spoke to this lattice work. And our ambassador in Japan, Rahm Emanuel, has a great phrase where he says we were moving from force protection to force projection. All those things felt like not something that was of a moment, but really of a generation, of a new way of working and going into the world, out into the world with Japan. In terms of Prime Minister Kishida, again, he didn't look like someone with a lot of, and didn't sound like someone with a lot on his mind. He got a little bit of a bump from the visit. He got a little bit more of a bump we saw in polling just this week. So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on the internal politics of a ally, but it was a tremendous, really, really great visit, and I think that's what counts.
That's great. I might ask you just one more question before turning it over to my colleague to introduce the panelists. We've had a run here the last decade where the power of culture and people-to-people ties has really sort of come to the forefront. We've seen a lot in Korea with pop music and K-dramas, and I feel like we're in a moment now with Japanese culture really kind of taking center stage. Many Americans have enjoyed watching the Hulu series Shogun. Many Americans are really glued to the TV sets every time Shohei Ohtani comes up to the plate in baseball. What do you think the role of these cultural ties, people-to-people ties going forward will be in terms of strengthening the overall alliance?
And don't forget the Oscar-winning The Boy and the Heron. I think we have one of the reasons we wanted to make sure coming out of this visit that we have this fund to kind of help make sure Japanese students can afford to come to our very expensive schools. And we also signed several MOUs to make it easier for Japanese teachers to come here and teach Japanese, which seem to be anecdotally on the upswing, is because it's the people-to-people side, as you point out, that really undergirds the relationship and gives strength to the alliance. We see that increasing in the years ahead. And I think the cultural component, as people tune back into their great interest in Japan, we see that will help keep those ties very strong for the next generation and beyond. So it's a really exciting time to be working on this relationship. It's very different than working on the U.S.-China relationship right now, I will say, in a kind of personal comment. But it's been great. It was a great visit. We had tremendous collaboration from colleagues across the Japanese interagency and tremendous cooperation in our interagency. And this made for really excellent meetings and do outs and deliverables, which we all have to follow up on now. So it was great to talk about it and really look forward to what the panel has to say. Happy to answer any other questions as they come along. Thank you again, Randy and Project 2049 for this tremendous opportunity.
Well, thank you, Nick, and appreciate setting the stage for us for this panel discussion, but even more so grateful for all the time and effort you've put into strengthening this alliance through your current position and really throughout your career in so many ways. So with that, Jen, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, thank you. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today and all the audience members who are with us tuning in right now. My name is Jennifer Hong. I'm the Senior Director at Project 2049, and we will transition to the second part of our webinar today. We have three amazing, excellent panelists to comment on both what was discussed and just thinking about U.S.-Japan alliance broadly. So I would like to introduce my three panelists. The first one is Yuki Tatsumi. She is a senior fellow and co-director of the East Asia program and director of the Japan program at the Stimson Center. Before joining Stimson, she worked as a research associate at CSIS and as the special assistant for political affairs at the Embassy of Japan in Washington. She is a prolific author, with the most recent publication being the Balancing Between Nuclear Deterrence and Disarmament: Views from the Next Generation. After we hear from Yuki, we're going to go to Yuko Mukai, who is a Washington correspondent for the Yomiuri Shimbun, where she's been a political reporter for 15 years. She served as a bureau chief for Yomiuri in Taiwan, covering extensively in Southeast Asia, Philippines, and the South China Sea issues. And she's also a non-resident fellow at the Project 2049 Institute. We're so excited to have you both. And then we're going to transition over to Josh Young, who's a colleague of mine, the executive director for Project 2049 Institute's China Economic and Strategy Initiative. Before joining Project 2049, he worked for the Department of Defense and on the Hill, and his government service includes his role as the country director for Japan in the Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Office at DoD. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yuki for 5 minutes or so comments, and then Yuko and Josh, you'll just smoothly transition over. So go ahead.
All right, thank you, Jen. Can everybody hear me? Thank you. Thanks again for Project 2049 to give me this opportunity. This is always a fun panel to join in. And thank you, Nick, for your great readout of the summit. I enjoyed, I was a beneficiary of some of the amazing events that was happening, including arrival ceremony and the luncheon that Vice President Harris and the Sec State Blinken co-hosted for the Prime Minister Kishida. So it was all in all wonderful. And my gosh, and I can only salute to you, your staff, your interagency staff, for the 11-page leader statement and 17-page fact sheets. That is probably the longest record-breaking length of the fact sheets and the statements that I've been counting. But I think that goes to show you really the not just the 70+ highlights that Nick mentioned, but also the depth and the I guess almost the intertwined and shared interests that the two allies share today. And my origination is more of a political military side, so I was really excited to see a lot of the announcements and initiatives that was announced at the summit on the defense cooperation side, particularly the modernization of the C2 structure between the two militaries, and then also DICAS, which is the joint G2G consultative group to identify the areas of the cooperation in the areas of defense technology, more focused on the emerging technology that was also highlighted during the summit. I think my as much as the excitement was, a lot of those initiatives means a lot of work on everybody else following the summit on the implementation side, and some of that could actually mean some of the potentially legislative changes in the Japanese existing laws, which could present itself as a potential challenge. So I would love to hear speakers' perspective on those. It is really clear that the two leaders do share really deep vision and shared vision for free and open Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Kishida has been the when he was late former Prime Minister Abe's foreign minister, he was really the implementer of late Prime Minister Abe's vision, and then now he's in the driver's seat. He's adding his own kind of a soft touch to it. So I just would like I would love to also hear Nick's perspective on the I guess modification or enhancement that Prime Minister Kishida added since he was in the office, kind of inheriting the Prime Minister Abe's vision for the free and open Indo-Pacific. So I think that'll probably two of my biggest takeaway from this wonderful opening presentation, and that I would love to hear everybody else's, and that I basically leaving all the economic security, supply chain resiliency related issues to Josh. So I love to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you, Yuki. I know that we had initially decided we were going to go to Yuko and Josh, but I would love to give Nick an opportunity to comment on that question or the comment by Yuki.
Thanks, and thanks for those nice words, Yuki. And I will say the team here and at OSD and across the interagency did work really, really hard day and night. And the Japanese, of course, never seemed to sleep at all. They were amazing too. On command and control, this has been, this will be handled in that security 2+2 channel. But one thing, there's lots of different commentary out there on what it could look like, what it should look like. Everybody has their opinion. I'm sure Lloyd's has opened its own, betting pool. But what I would say is one thing everyone agrees on is that what worked post World War II and maybe post Vietnam needs to be updated, and that is what we will look at. And it's critically important that we do so. On the Defense Industrial Cooperation, Acquisition, and Sustainment Forum, something we're calling the Forum, or DICUS, if you'd like. I think the Forum sounds a little bit better. That's going to look at co-production, co-development, co-sustainment. It'll also handle, where we might go with ship and aircraft repairs outside of the U.S., subject to Congress. And it's gonna meet this June in its first iteration, led by the Undersecretary of Acquisition and Sustainment for DoD and the ATLA Commissioner. So I think it's going to have working groups. It will take a lot of industry feedback, that's for sure, and that's incredibly important for where we want to go. And I think we'll get some more clarity after initial meetings, but that forum will be really great for the co-production angle and all the things that I think are really possible in this new world with Japan. And you have to salute Prime Minister Kishida. Prime Minister Abe sort of laid the intellectual framework and foundation, and he has really followed through on that, and it shows. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Yuko, turning it over to you.
To serve as a panelist here today, and thank you for the wonderful discussion by Mr. Schneider and Randy. Before I start my remarks, I'd like to make it clear. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, my apology. And I'd like to make it clear that the view is my own, but not the one of Yomiuri Shimbun. First, as Mr. Schneider explained, that Japan-US alliance has entered the higher stage now than ever by this visit. The title of Kishida's address to the US Congress, quote, "For the future, our global partnership," quote, really highlighted it. This was a speech that towards Japan's determination to deal with global challenges as an equal partner with the United States. 9 years ago, the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also gave an address to the US Congress at his official visit that time. That time, his speech title was, quote, "Toward an Alliance of Hope," quote. Abe's speech touched of the history of World War II and showed condolences to the victim of the war to put an end to the tragic past of two countries. The following year, President Obama visited Hiroshima and Abe visited Pearl Harbor, and they concluded this process. Then, now Kishida's speech opened a new chapter and looked ahead the alliance for next decade. In his speech, Prime Minister Kishida made truly significant statements. We also know that peace requires more than understanding. It requires resolve. Resolve is a word that expresses absolute determination, but in Japanese translation, the word kakugo, with the nuance of preparation for worse, is used. Japan has not only made up its mind, but it is now in the stage of preparation. So then, what is Japan preparing for? Needless to say, it is China. In his speech, Kishida stated China is a great, quote, greatest strategic challenge, quote. To be blunt, the policy focus on this visit was all about China. There was also Japan-US Philippines summit, as seen in the case of former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who kept a distance from US and moved closer to China. Philippines is a country diplomatically a little bit unstable because of its history. Now, under the Marcos administration, the Philippines is once again taking a pro-US stance. In the joint statement of this trilateral, the leaders expressed serious concern on South China Sea, which is currently the biggest flashpoint, as Mr. Snyder explained, and East China Sea, where Japan is countering PRC's gray zone tactics over the Senkaku Island every day. It is noteworthy the leaders touched the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait in this document in terms of implementing these three issues as a series of Chinese challenges to the status quo and as current international orders. Perhaps the reaction from PRC side underscores how this visit was meaningful and impactful. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the top political attaché of the Japanese embassy in Beijing, and a spokesperson for Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs strongly criticized as, quote, US and Japan have been ganging up and stoking bloc confrontation, quote. Perhaps the PRC has been disappointed by Kishida's hardline approach to China, because Kishida comes from the most dovish faction of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. This faction has a long history of being rather pro-China. There is an episode several years ago. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi once told Kishida, quote, "You should value your relationship with China," quote, by mentioning about his faction. What is behind of Kishida's hurt stance toward China? In a nationwide survey conducted by Yomiuri Shimbun this spring, 93% of respondents saw China is a threat to Japan. This is unbelievably high number. I should say that this hardline approach to China has become the norm in Japanese politics. As Randy mentioned, Japanese politics has been this uncertainty ahead. Well, Kishida is now struggling with his very low approval rate. The latest number is only 25%, and I hardly think he will be able to try the snap election or survive until this fall as a prime minister, but Japan's approach to China will not change easily whoever takes his office. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm turning it over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Jen. Mr. Schneider, thank you for your time today and your overview of the alliance. I think as someone that has sat there and negotiated joint statements before bilateral, I think the most interesting fact you dropped is how easy it was to negotiate the joint statement for this go around.
Comparatively, can I just say comparatively?
Well, I've been on midnight phone calls many a times negotiating text. So if that's the case, we've truly entered a new era of the alliance, and that's good to hear for everybody. Some of the things that just really caught my attention, one, I think the comments that were made up front about how these aren't efforts that come together overnight. I mean, 70 deliverables clearly don't just manifest themselves within weeks. So I think it's a testament to how the alliance has evolved over the past several years. I still look back to the 2022 when Japan released its NSS and then its new national defense strategy, what I would consider a large upgrade from its national defense program guidelines. And to me, it was a very strong signal about how Japan is now starting to think about things in a more strategic context. On the defense front, several years ago, when it was rolled out that Japan would be acquiring, Tomahawks and upgrading their Type 12s to have counter-strike capability, I think was significant. But obviously to follow that up now with command and control, I mean, you can't have an effective counter-strike capability without a command and control network where you understand and see what the battle landscape looks like, and then can engage targets effectively. So I think I'm very optimistic and hopeful that the alliance can make the progress that it needs to get that up and running. As other people have also mentioned on the defense industrial base cooperation, this is a relationship that needs and must be upgraded. When it comes to co-production of things such as munitions, that should be a massive area of cooperation. I'm optimistic and hopeful that especially where we have combined or shared use of not shared use in the military sense, but where we use the same munitions, such as say Tomahawks in this case, if we could co-produce those, I think that'd be very positive. Economically, there's been massive alignment between the United States and Japan in this regard. Obviously, with the focus on new technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, but also things in the biotechnology space, they're all positive. But there was language in the joint statement that really caught my attention when they talked about countering non-market policies and practices. And to me, I think this really, in many ways, for me, was a nod to how the United States and Japan are working together, to build robust supply chains that China may have, control over. Semiconductors is a big part of that, but I also think about critical minerals and all the work that Japan is doing there, and the 2023 critical minerals agreement the United States and Japan signed last year. One sector though, one area that the joint statement got at that I'd just like to, really highlight is it made continued reference to Japan's expanding regional security role. It obviously talked about, the deepening of, the reinvigoration of ties between the United States, Japan, and Korea, which is, vital, when it comes to ballistic missile defense and addressing the threat from North Korea. But it also mentioned numerous times about how Japan could be upgrading its partnership with the United States with Australia. Obviously, this could take place in the form of inclusion to AUKUS. But coming out of the meetings in Hawaii last week between the defense chiefs, they also signed a new RDT&E agreement, which although it's not a formal inclusion to AUKUS, to me that is a strong positive sign that they are looking for trilateral cooperation to work on things that are in the research development, testing and evaluation space, and could make their inclusion to AUKUS much more streamlined. But on the flip side, we also still can't. I think Mr. Schneider mentioned the comments about making the shift from force protection to force projection. As part of this, we cannot not talk about the reciprocal access agreements Japan's been signing in recent years. One with the UK. Obviously they have one with Australia. They recently signed one with Germany, and now also talks of them, reaching one with France and the Philippines as well. I think that this once again goes back to, Japan thinking about itself as more of a strategic player, and in line with the national defense strategy rolled out several years ago. And all in all, I think I'm very uplifted where the summit landed, what was in the deliverables. But I'm also very excited to see where it's going to go.
Thank you, Josh. Yuki, Yuka, and Josh, thank you so much for your insightful comments. We have many questions coming in, so given the interest of time, I'm going to jump straight into those questions. The first question is from Dimitri Sevastopoulos from Financial Times. What more does Japan need to do to bolster information security so that the U.S. and other allies can share more sensitive information with Tokyo? Nick, can I turn it over to you? Do you have any thoughts?
Sure. They are working on their own legislation to address this, and we have, our bilateral ways of doing that as well. I think it is important that they address this so that we can we do good information sharing. We need to take it to the next level. I think the Japanese are aware that, and they certainly desire that as well. And that is going to be part of where we go in the future. I'll leave it at that, but welcome others to comment.
Yuki?
Yep. So I guess historically, the problem with the Japanese side when it comes to intel sharing is that for government officials, what they call the equivalent of our security clearance belongs to his or her possession and not necessarily to that specific individual. So once he moves out, he or she moves from one, as he or she moves from one position to another, there are different levels of security clearance requirement that are attached to it that that individual do not necessarily carry over. And that can be said about the industry side as well, which is a huge problem when you think about it, because a lot of most of Japanese defense industry has a much larger share of their non-defense business portfolio. So as the employee of those or engineers moves between those moves between those different positions, the clearance does not follow those individual. So there was that problem. So hopefully the legislation that the Japan is debating right now will resolve that problem, because that is really important for not just U.S. but the any other foreign government who would like to go into Japan with the much deeper level of sensitive information sharing.
I just want to comment that the security clearance law that Mr. Schneider and Yuki mentioned is currently in the Congress, and we foresee it's going to pass the Congress tomorrow. So tomorrow in JST. So we'll see. It is amazing how quickly this law passed the Congress whole process. It's only a month. And when we think about how it was politically a big conflict in the Congress when Prime Minister Abe tried to pass the law to have more tighter security, we had a big political struggle in the Congress. So compared with that time, it is now, I would say now, all the Japanese political parties are understanding how this is important for the Japan's security.
I just wanted to add very briefly, so the legislation and the comments have mostly focused on the human side of this, the background checks, whether clearances follow or not. There's also a technical side of this, which is cyber defenses and data protection, which is very key. You can clear people and have the clearances follow them, but if you don't have systems that are well protected and have good cyber defenses, that's still a big hole.
Yeah, thank you. This will be the final question. For those of you who sent us questions and we have not been able to entertain them, please send it to us and we'll see if we can get these answers back to you in some form or fashion. This question is from Russell Xiao from Global Taiwan Institute. The joint vision statement by the U.S., Japan, and the Philippines affirm the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait as an indispensable element of global security and prosperity. What future steps can we expect to see the three sides take with Taiwan in bolstering deterrence and promoting peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait? Okay. Go ahead, Nick.
Nope. I'll leave that to Yoko. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Yuka.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Snyder. I just wanted to comment that I understand this time I would like to ail to Philippines because Philippines had a little bit struggle if they should put the Taiwan Strait in the joint statement, but they did. It is amazing. And I would say, because what if Taiwan contingency happens? Who's going to be more affected? Philippines and Japan. I think Japan definitely do more security dialogue with Philippines, and we should talk about Taiwan more by the bilateral, any kind of statement, we should put this phrase into it. And that's what I wanted to say.
Josh, and then Yuki.
Thanks, Jen. You know, the one thing I just encourage people is pull back. I think that the U.S., Japan, and Philippines trilateral, I think, is a very positive thing. But I think we need to understand that the nature of that relationship is at different places, say, compared to the U.S., Japan, Korea, or even the U.S., Japan, Australia. But I would also encourage people to think about these in terms of a more holistic standpoint. I don't think that just the U.S., Japan, Philippine relationship is going to be what preserves peace and stability, in the region. I think it's the broader network that I previously mentioned that's really going to start to bring all of this together in these different ties. And once again, I mean, Japan's also engaging with our European partners, and not just ones individually, but they're also engaging more with NATO and everything from information, looking to engage with information sharing agreements and cyber defenses as well. So I think, as I'd encourage people to think about is the more holistic picture of all of these separate trilaterals that are taking place and how those can start to be knitted and fitted together. Because every ally and partner here, whether it be the Philippines, Australia, Korea, or the UK, or Germany, or France, everyone is going to bring something, a different element to what is ultimately going to hopefully develop kind of a more regional security net architecture.
Yuki, did you have something to add? And then I'll turn it over to you, Nick.
Absolutely. So very quickly, I'm really glad that Josh brought up the networking of these different bilaterals and minilaterals and trilateral relationship. It is really important to kind of look at it, kind of taking a step back and looking at the broader way of just how to deter any kind of a provocative behavior or any kind of a coercive effort to change the status quo in the Indo-Pacific, right? And then it's not just, of course, Taiwan Strait contingency is an important scenario that we need to continue to think about, but then not everything should be focused just on that, because there are plethora of issues in a region wide that are much bigger and broader and have a much more complicated impact on it. So like Josh said, U.S. Japan ROK used to be primarily focused just on North Korea, but now it's getting much more broader. And then the relationship is become more multifaceted. Same thing can be said about U.S. Japan Australia, U.S. Japan UK, and then even Japan and NATO, and all kinds of mixes. So I think it's really important to kind of think about the complexity and the size of the region, because Indo-Pac is, and we haven't really spent enough time talking about India, but partnership with India is going to be hugely important moving forward as well. So as we look at this area as like one broad, block of Big C, it is important that how those different combination of relationship can each contribute its own uniqueness to this much broader effort of keeping the free and open Indo-Pacific. And then I think I would just like to go back to Prime Minister Kishida's address to the U.S. Congress while he was here, where he talked about, Japan, like all the other U.S. allies and partners in the region and beyond, continues to look to U.S. taking a leadership role. But he also said, but you shouldn't have to do it alone. And Japan will be there, right there with you. And I think that was the really important message that the Prime Minister Kishida delivered to the members of the Congress, especially given this political climate.
Great. Thanks, Yuki and Josh and Yoko. Exactly. I think glad everyone noticed exactly what's going on, that we are building this lattice work of interlapping trilaterals, the Quad, other minilaterals that really have real and signaling power on deterrence. And I just wanted to add, there's not just China. Unfortunately, there's Russia, there's North Korea. These are significant problems, and if you look at the joint statement coming out of the bilateral visit of Prime Minister Kishida, we address all these things, and the U.S. and Japan need to take a very strong stance on it, on all of them. But we're not in it alone. We have, as been mentioned, Australia. We have the joint statement points to new work with the UK, and we have our trilateral, very, very brave, between President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida, the trilateral cooperation with Japan and South Korea. And just final point, I think this visit also recognized that it's one theater now. It's not just the Indo-Pacific. It's all combined, and we have to look and work globally. And that's what we have. Global partnership for the future. So thanks for letting me have this opportunity to chat with you all about that.
Thank you. On behalf of Project 2049, I want to thank you, the speakers, the panelists, and most importantly, the audience who is participating and tuning in right now. If you want to catch this webinar again, we will have the recording available on our website as well as our YouTube channel. And if you want to share this recording with others who could not join, please come and share widely. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.